Tēnā no tātou, nau mai hoki mai ki te wāhanga tua toru o tēnei mea te Māori Leadership. Welcome back to our third instalment of our presentation regarding Māori Leadership. And so we're going to get straight into it, and again we will start off with looking at the marae, ngā wai o horotiu, where we will get the basis of our knowledge, our repositories of knowledge as well in the Māori world. So we've talked about the tāhuhu, the heke, and the pōpō in terms of the carvings that are placed around the marae. Now we're going to go into the up-and-coming leaders, our contemporary leaders of today, our contemporary forms of Māori leadership, and highlight some of those things regarding colonisation, regarding the fact that since colonisation, what's happened, as a result of colonisation, what's happened to the makeup of Māori leadership within Aotearoa, New Zealand. So there are a few significant things that happened in the past. In particular, a couple of dates here that are thrown up on the screen, which is 1847, the Education Ordinance Act, which meant that a lot of our children of the times were not permitted to speak the Māori language. In fact, they were beaten and punished. It was legally okay to beat and punish our Māori children who spoke the Māori language back in 1847, and and that sent ripples throughout Māoridom, throughout our culture. And a prime example was my dad, who's passed away now, but when he went to elementary school at the age of 5, he couldn't speak one word of English. Actually, the only word he knew was the word yes, but he had grown up totally in the Māori language. So when he went to school, he didn't understand, and he was blamed for something. He was blamed for something he didn't do. So the teacher asked him, "Did you do that?" And the only word he knew was yes. So he just said yes. And so he got beaten and punished for doing something that he was blamed for. And he had a traumatic upbringing. My dad is just one example of thousands and thousands of Māori children that went through that system. And he decided right there and then that he would never ever speak the language to us. And so my brothers and sister and I, we grew up in the household where the Māori language was forbidden, wasn't spoken in the house, because our father didn't want us to go through the traumatic experience that he went through. So he stopped speaking the language to us. And so the language that I'm speaking to you, that I've been using through this presentation, is a language that I had to learn from my high school years and my university years. So I am now fluent in both languages. However, it's a sad thing that has now happened. Another important date in Māori history, New Zealand history, regarding colonisation is the 1907 Ordinance Act, the 1907 Tohunga Suppression Act, which forbid the practices, our spiritual healers were forbidden to practice the culture, were forbidden to practice spiritual methods, healing methods of old. And that was supported by some of the politicians in Parliament of the time, and that also took the feet away from Māori in terms of culture, language, history, customs, protocols, traditions. And so our spiritual healers were forbidden to practice spiritual healing. So those two activities, those two areas, those two years were just part of many, many forms of legislation that was slowly brought in and introduced to ensure that Māori were pushed further and further down the spectrum of making decisions within Aotearoa to the point where Māori became second-class citizens in their own country. So when we look at the ariki and rangatira social structure, traditional hierarchy social structure, compared to the new government of the time that's coming in, you could see that the ariki and rangatira social structure was eroding, and more people were being pulled under the government, the new government scheme, the British sovereignty, and the Treaty of Waitangi was set up as a symbol of connectedness, was set up as a symbol of two peoples coming together. Some believe that the Treaty of Waitangi was merely a smokescreen to have the government come in and take over the governing of New Zealand, and the autonomy of New Zealand. So the status or the mana or the authority of the rangatira and the ariki was being eroded, and allowing more power to be shifted across to the government. And so when we look at that sort of evolution from traditional Māori leadership to contemporary Māori leadership, we had new roles starting to emerge, and those sort of roles were seen as people in government official positions. Religious leaders started to come forth, professional business women, business people and men, educators, teachers, philosophers, and group leaders started to emerge as a result of that evolution of leadership and the changing of roles and responsibilities over a period of 40, 50, 60 years. So it wasn't very long before the traditional social structure was broken down completely, and is still there, but left as a symbol of what used to happen in the past, evolving into what we see today. And as a result of that, there were some benefits, advantages and disadvantages, but some of the advantages I wanted to highlight here were images of what you see on the screen, which is our types of leaders that came as a result of that. And these leaders came from all facets of in all areas, all corners of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and they came forth in the form of spiritual leaders, language leaders, cultural leaders, political leaders, educators. And you will see here a couple of people here I just wanted to highlight. We have Dame Te Atairangi Kahu, which is the late Māori Queen. She was the sixth in line. Her son is currently the Māori King. His name is Kingi Tuheitia. And so her roles, the idea of the kingitanga or the king movement came out in the 1850s, came out as in response to that evolution of Māori leadership, traditional forms of Māori leadership into contemporary forms. So the kingitanga or the king movement is in response to that evolution. And so she's the sixth in line. We also have a person by the name of Te Whiti o Rongomai sitting here with his bowler hat, who revolutionised the idea of protest. He was the first to create this idea of passive resistance, and much later on, after he passed away, another famous leader, religious leader right throughout the world, his name is Gandhi, took on that idea of passive resistance. So Te Whiti o Rongomai's presence and ideas were taken up by Gandhi. We also have Dame Katerina Te Hei Koko Mataira here. She was instrumental in bringing back the language, the Māori language, reviving the Māori language, and she started off in a small little garage of her house, and she developed a learning model whereby all Māori, non-Māori could learn the Māori language. And so she understood very quickly at an early age that Māori are kinesthetic learners, Māori are visual learners, And so she used a method called the Te Ātārangi method of teaching the Māori language, which is basically using the coloured rods that they use for maths. So she used those as language building blocks. And today, thousands and thousands and thousands of people have benefited because of the work that she's done, and continuing to do so. Although they've moved out of garages and they're in classrooms right now. So that's the revitalisation of the Māori language. She was right at the start of that. She was also at the start of kura kaupapa, or kohanga reo, meaning she was the first principal and first teacher of the kohanga reo movement, which is the language, Māori language, total immersion for preschool. And she was part of that movement as well, along with other significant leaders. But Dame Katerina Te Heikoko Mataira was right at the start of that movement. There are many more, but I'm going to move on. I'm going to roll on into the next slide. So when we look at contemporary leaders today, in today's society, in comparison to the traditional forms of Māori leadership and the roles and responsibilities, we have those 8 that have come down. You will now look, and there are a whole set of criteria that is expected of a Māori contemporary leader today. And if you can see here, we have quite a lot in comparison to the traditional forms of Māori leadership, the attributes that is required of a Māori back in the 1840s with Te Rangi Kāheke's work, as well as Tiki Tū's work in 1907. So when we look into today, these are just some of the things that a typical Māori leader of today would need to have a grasp and need to have a good handle on. Make sound judgments, te reo me ngā tikanga, so the language, understanding the language, understanding the nuances of what language does, understanding to say your pepeha, or your connections before you speak, understanding the fine art of connecting with people, understanding where people come from, very important in the Māori world. If you don't acknowledge where people come from, then you're not acknowledging that person. So having that knowledge and knowing those sorts of things is all part and parcel of being a contemporary leader today. Alongside with many other attributes that any basic leader needs to know and needs to have. These are some of them here. Another word I want to bring out is expert knowledge of te ao Māori. Te ao Māori meaning the Māori world, the Māori environment, and keeping up to date with what's happening in the Māori world. So a Māori leader needs to understand those sorts of things as well. And the last but not least is active kanohi kitea. The word or the concept kanohi kitea. Kanohi meaning face or eyes, and kitea meaning to see or to look or to observe. So to be an active participant in many events and activities, community events and community activities that are around, and being there. So there's quite a lot of work that's involved to be a typical Māori leader within a community. In Aotearoa, New Zealand, there's quite a lot of work one needs to do. And these are merely some attributes that you're going to need to have a grasp in order to be in this role, in this responsibility. So if we look at Mead's 2006, he's also laid out some of the things that a contemporary leader may also need to have to be equipped with, to have these qualities and attributes as well. Very similar to past leadership attributes, but as you can see, being able to connect with hapu and iwi. When I talked about those traditional structures, we have iwi in terms of people, and then hapu within those iwi. So knowing those connections of hapu within an iwi goes a long way. Knowing how they connect with each other, knowing the whakapapa, knowing the genealogy, knowing how to connect one person with one person if they are from different hapu, having the ability to find and to seek out the common ancestor that connects them is is mind-boggling. So you have to know that, have that knowledge. Not only that, but being able to connect iwi to other iwi when they're not in the same waka. So you have one iwi here in one waka, and another iwi here in that waka, knowing the history of those two iwi and where they eventually connect. And so acknowledging where that connection is. So all of those things are very important when it comes to contemporary forms of Māori leadership today. And experts in that area that I've just finished talking about are laid out here. These people here are currently at the front end, are currently alive and well and doing many of those things that have been stated earlier by me. In particular, we have Kingi Tuheitia here, who is the current king. He's the seventh one in line. His father was his mother. Was the late Dame Te Atairangi Kahu. Her father was Kingi Koroki. His father was Kingi Terata. His father was Kingi Mahuta. His father was Kingi Tawhiao. And then his father was Kingi Potatau Te Wherowhero, the first Māori king. So as each line drops down, so does the new leader come forth. So we have a saying that says, "Mate atu he te kura, ara ake anō he te kura." As one chief passes on, so does another chief arise. So it's that analogy. Those analogies are laid out to explain the succession of mana, or succession of authority and responsibility and roles passed down from one to another, to another, to another. So they are taking up the roles that was left behind by their forefathers, just as Kingi Tuheitia is doing right now. We have this person here, Sir Peter Sharples, who worked collaboratively with Dame Katerina Te Hei Kōkō Mataira, who I talked about previously, about the revitalisation of the Māori language. And so we have Sir Peter, who was also part of that build, part of that movement of Māori education right at the forefront. And they began the idea of building alongside the normal New Zealand education curriculum for Māori kids. They built an idea called the Aho Matua, which runs alongside the education system within New Zealand for preschool, for elementary, primary, and intermediate, middle school, and eventually into high school, which we call colleges, and then into universities. So Sir Peter Sharples was part of that movement. In fact, he was right at the start. Sir Peter and Dame Katerina Mataira were right at the front. So and so many more. We have on the bottom right here, we have Dame Naida Glavish, who's known nowadays as the Kia ora lady. She basically highlighted the importance of her actions, actually highlighted the importance of the language, Māori language within New Zealand, and her story is a great one. You might want to look it up. Dame Naida Glavish, and she talked about working one day as a telecommunicator, as a phone operator, where you would plug people in. Someone would ring the telecom, and then they would then plug you through to the person that you needed to speak to. So every time she picked up the phone, she would use the word kia ora, much to the dismay of her boss, of her supervisor, who didn't like her using the language. Right up until the day she complained and said, it's the language that I know and that I speak, and we're in New Zealand, we should be speaking that. And he put pressure on her. That eventually got out into the news, and more people. This was about 40, 50, 60 years ago. More and more people heard about her plight, and it blew up on the news, and obviously it then became an issue. It became an idea to talk about how important the Māori language is, how unique it is. It's unique to Aotearoa, it's unique to New Zealand, it's part of us, we are part of it. And so as a result of that, idea or that issue that Nader had experienced, the language then became, the Māori language then became an official language of New Zealand. And now you will notice more and more news presenters and more radio hosts are using the word kia ora to start off, as well as our Prime Minister. So it's become normalised now and not something that's set to the side and not something that's unimportant. It's now become part of the fabric of our country. So we have Dame Nader Glavish, who is a leader in herself for her tribe, Ngāti Whātua, which is one of the main one of the main tribes in the Auckland area. And so from those contemporary leaders, we have a message from Kingi Tuheitia, and this message is basically recent. I'm not going to play that. I'm going to leave this presentation for you to play later on. It's a couple of minutes long, and it's just him giving a message of solidarity, of coming together under the unprecedented times that we are facing right now. And it's for him to say to his people and to all of Aotearoa and to the world, kia kaha, kia maia, kia manawa nui. Be strong, be vigilant, and be stout of heart. And so that message is there. You can please check that out. That's him giving some words of encouragement. The next part that I wanted to talk about when it comes to Māori leadership is the notion of mana and the notion of whakapapa. So we also understand whakapapa means genealogy, but whakapapa also means identity. Whakapapa means layers of acknowledgement. Whakapapa means layers of work that people have done previously. Whakapapa also means those layers don't just stay at that point. Those layers are built on and they provide a foundation for us as the next generations to come through. So Māori leadership looks at those layers and acknowledges the layers. It acknowledges the work that's been previously done by our forefathers, by our uncles, by our aunts, by our grandfathers, grandmothers. So that's what whakapapa is. Mana permeates right through whakapapa. So mana is power and authority, literally, power and authority. Mana is also sovereignty. Mana is one's own authority. So even though people have authority outside your circle, they will never be able to have mana over you. You have mana. Everyone has their own mana intact, and no one can take your mana away. No one can take your power away. So the idea, the notion of the word mana is given to every single person. It's up to that person to decide how their mana is going to be either influential, or how their mana perhaps is going to be detrimental. So when it comes to Māori leadership, mana it can be bestowed upon people. Mana can be given to people, and mana can be inherited. So I'm going to talk about 3 types of mana that Māori leaders today possess, or a mixture of some. And those mana are called mana heke iho. So mana heke iho, heke means to descend, just like the ribs, just like the rafters. Mana heke iho. Iho means to come downwards. So mana heke iho, power and authority that comes down. So when it comes to leadership, people have mana that are brought down, that have come down through generations upon generation upon generation. So that leadership has come down. And a prime example of that mana heke iho, or ascribed leadership, is Kingi Tuheitia, Dame Te Atairangi Kāhu. The King movement, the kingitanga, is a perfect example of royal mana dropping down from father to son, father to son, father to son, father to daughter, daughter to son, and so on and so forth, in that line of succession. So the mana and power and authority have been handed down through hereditary channels. The second mana I wanted to explain is mana tuku atu. So mana tuku. Tuku means to give mana. Okay, so when it's an acknowledgement of someone's work. So if you see someone has the skills, abilities, and qualities, attributes that create or that make up a good leader of society or good leader of a group, then people or group will decide, yes, that person shows these attributes. Therefore, they give that mana. So you're giving them the power and authority to do the best because they are the right person for the job. So mana tuku. Tuku means to release. So you're releasing your mana. Mana tuku iho. And that's prescribed or assigned leadership. And the third and final mana that I want to discuss is mana tupu ake. Okay, so mana tupu. Tupu is to grow, or tipu. Tipu or tupu is to grow. Okay, so grow from the ground up. So it's an emerging leadership qualities. So not necessarily handed down, not necessarily given out, but a person that because of his or her own attributes, they are natural leaders. They're naturally born to lead communities, to lead groups, to make wise and sound decisions. That's what mana tupu ake means. Tupu ake means to rise up. So those are the three different parts of what mana is, and whakapapa are the layers, and mana runs right through them. So the good and bad types of leaders, and this is very poignant when it comes to Māori leadership. So I'll just go through some of them because a lot of it's about people and about communities rather than the single person themselves. So we're more about the collective as opposed to the individual. So good leaders are servants of their people. Bad leaders make their people become servants. Good leaders encourage unity so that people can work together. Bad leaders create division amongst their followers in order to strengthen their position. Good leaders realize the dream and aspirations of their followers, and bad leaders are more interested in their own dreams. Good leaders join networks so that their followers can have greater opportunities, and bad leaders develop walls so that outsiders can't get in or insiders can't get out. Good leaders explore the future so that their followers can move with the times, and bad leaders resist change and cling to the past. Good leaders develop others so that they can take up leadership roles, and bad leaders are threatened by new leaders or new leadership. Good leaders earn respect and loyalty from their followers, and bad leaders demand the respect and loyalty. So just on that, every single point that's here is exactly a makeup of, again, what Māori leadership is. If you don't understand this model, if you don't understand the comparison between the two, then you won't understand what Māori leadership is. As I said before, Māori leadership is about the collective rather than the individual. Now this word kaupapa. Kaupapa means purpose, philosophy, or a movement, or an idea. One can be kaupapa driven. Okay, so if you're kaupapa driven, if you're purpose driven, which is another part of a facet of Māori leadership, then people will follow that. If you're a person driven, people won't follow that. But if you're kaupapa driven, people will look at that leader and go, yes, okay, that person thinks about the collective, thinks about the community, and it's driven. So what's driving that person will eventually be for the betterment of all, rather than the betterment of one person. So people follow that, and in Māoridom it's very important that people understand, and the leader is transparent about the goals, the vision, the dreams that he or she wants for their people, for their communities. So there's another clip here. It's about 5 or 6 minutes long. Not going to play it. You can please look at it. It's called Movement Leaderships, taken from YouTube. But I think it's a real cool way of understanding the idea of what kaupapa and movement of leadership means. So check that out. Speaking of kaupapa, the next 3 or 4 slides talks about what sorts of things we are doing here at AUT, what sorts of things we are doing globally in terms of taking kaupapa abroad. Now, Māori leadership just doesn't stay within Māoridom. Māori leadership just doesn't stay within Aotearoa, New Zealand. Māori leadership also is global. And here are some examples of what that looks like. And it's only one little facet of what Māori leadership looks like abroad. So, and the effects that it has had on other communities, other universities, and so on and so forth. So something that I'm really, really proud of being part of is the kaupapa abroad, and they are called the whānau councils. Whānau meaning family, and councils obviously meaning the groups throughout the world. So we have whānau councils that basically get together because under a common theme, and that common theme is that they've been to New Zealand, they've been part of kaupapa, they've been on the marae, they've been, they've smelt, breathed, lived, touched everything that I've just finished talking about over the last 3 sessions. And so this is a continuation of how to take leadership, or Māori leadership, and the values and the principles and the beliefs of Māori leadership globally, how to continue that idea of leadership abroad. So we have the whānau councils here. We have a combination of 3 or 4 universities that come together under the one kaupapa, under the one umbrella, and celebrate what it's like to be a whānau. And this is what they experienced at the marae at AUT, Auckland, New Zealand, and they continue on that connection. So Māori leadership abroad, kaupapa abroad, is about connecting and continuing to keep those connections, those fires burning, those fires alive. So we have whānau councils in the east of the US and also in the west of the US, in particular California, LA, and San Diego, and we have whānau there connecting again. We also have the whānau councils spread out across Europe, namely Denmark, Sweden, Germany, the Netherlands, Norway, Switzerland, Italy, to name a few. And in this case, it was Sweden that we went to last year to reconnect with our whānau, and again to take the idea of kaupapa abroad, to keep those fires burning, to keep the idea and the notion of sharing and connecting with each other, although they are back in their own country, they're back in their own cities, still keep that idea going. And that's leadership abroad. And in Sweden, we have gatherings, we have get-togethers, and we also learn the histories and traditions of each country that we go to. They come to New Zealand to learn about the New Zealand history. We go to Sweden to learn about the Swedish idea of fika, which means to get together and have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea over some cake and biscuits or cookies. And so we learn those special traits and those special traditions of those countries. And again, it reconnects us. We also have the Saskatchewan whānau, when I went there last year, back in 2019, to connect with the people there, to make connections. And so the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon, we went there and presented. So I just wanted to also include our taking our kaupapa abroad to our Indigenous communities, and in this case our Indigenous universities, Indigenous faculties, to connect with people and to share knowledge, just like how we're doing now. And we have went to significant areas, Poundmaker Reservation, and so on. We went to many in Canada, and we hope to keep those connections alive and keep them going. You can check out some of those videos there if you can. Learn about the land and learn about the breathing of the land, and which has similar likeness to New Zealand.
So the land breathes.
It breathes. Yep.
So you're not too sure. If you're not clued up, you don't know how far,
Exactly.
how close.
Yeah. Like right here, like we're looking at this. Most people think it's just a flat landscape, but there's actually ravines and microterrains in there. And this is where the woman actually fled and used this ravine
a hiding place.
as a hiding place and also a place to retreat and confuse if we did lose that battle. There's a ravine that goes back there, a bunch of little ravines that go that way, and then two that go that way. But unless you're actually immersed and know it, you
Yeah,
don't really know what you're looking at there.
true that.
That's
Curtis
my
doesn't
land.
know what he's doing.
And that's Curtis Finish there, right there. Checking out some berries, I think. Anyway, the last part of Kaupapa Abroad, or Māori Leadership Abroad, I wanted to just briefly talk about some of the projects that we're doing in terms of bringing Aotearoa, a little piece of Aotearoa, to other universities across the world, and in particular Champlain College, which is stationed in Vermont, Burlington, Vermont, the US. And as you can see there, there's a carving that was commissioned by one of our own carvers, who was an artist in residence at the Champlain College for 6 weeks, and there he taught his knowledge and shared his knowledge with the students and staff at the college. The carving was to commemorate, was to connect, stay as a symbol of connections between AUT University and Champlain College. We've had a long history of connectedness, and this was a physical embodiment of that connectedness. And we had many of our whānau that came from AUT attend, and many of our whānau that came from Champlain to AUT also attend. So we have had a lovely connection, a lovely relationship with Champlain College, and this is was the result. And so just to read out the idea of this particular carving, this piece of wood actually came from Vermont. It was felled by a lightning strike, by a big storm lightning strike, struck this tree, fell down, walnut tree fell down, and they saved the wood. And they didn't know why they saved the wood until about 2 years ago. An idea came up about building or carving a symbol, and the first thing was that they realized they had the wood, they just needed the carver. And so Pahi O'Carroll, who is a master carver, master teacher in the arts of Māori carving, from a small place in the North Island of New Zealand called Te Kuiti, he agreed to come over and share his knowledge. And so the idea behind this carving is called Te Hononga, which means a convergence of waterways and tributaries where meaningful connections are created, from the sacred waters of Ngā Waiohorotu, which is the marae, New Zealand, to the ancestral waters of Champlain, Vermont, from Māori to Abenaki, the people of the land, from the Auckland University of Technology to Champlain College, a convergence of life, humanity and wisdom. And so that concludes the final part 3 of our presentations for Māori Leadership. And following here, we have lots of readings that you can check out for yourself, and lots of media links regarding the Treaty of Waitangi, and it's some real up-to-date, really cool stuff. I understand in other parts of the world, especially in North America and Canada, we have many treaties and many broken treaties. New Zealand has only one treaty, and yes, it's flawed. Yes, there are some interpretations in that one treaty that speaks other things. However, it still sits as a foundational document, and it has managed to be inputted in a lot of legislative areas in schools and school charters, to sit as a symbol, so that allows cultural things to continue to happen, where schools must include aspects of the treaty in terms of the preservation of language, the preservation of culture, the teaching of language and culture to our children, not just Māori, but all children of Aotearoa, New Zealand. So many links there, and you can click into those. So that concludes my presentation. Nō reira, ka nui te mihi kia koutou katoa, e mihi ana, e tangi ana kia koutou, e noho ana ki ngā tōpito katoa te ao. Tēnei mātou, te Māori e mihi atu ana kia koutou. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou huri noa, tēnā rā koutou katoa. Thank you.